February 14th, 1944, RAF Woodhall Spa, Lincolnshire. The frost crunches under Flight Sergeant Tom Bennett's boots as he approaches Hangar 2. Inside, Lancaster ED 763 sits like a sleeping giant, its 4 Merlin engines silent in the pre-dawn cold. Bennett has maintained this bird for 8 months, knows every rivet, every oil streak, every battle scar hidden beneath fresh paint, which is why the modification order in his hand makes his stomach turn. Strip the bomb bay doors completely. Remove ventral turret. Strengthen main spar with additional steel plating. He reads it 3 times. The paper trembles slightly, not from the cold, but from what this means. A Lancaster without bomb bay doors is like a knight without armor. The aerodynamics alone would be catastrophic. The drag would turn the already sluggish bomber into a sitting duck. Any Luftwaffe pilot who spots it would think Christmas had come early. Wing Commander James Tate enters the hangar, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The pilots call him Tirpitz Tate, after his role in sinking the German battleship. If anyone understands the importance of bomber integrity, it's him. Yet his face shows resignation, not surprise. "How many aircraft, sir?" Bennett asks. 33 Lancasters. Maybe 40 if we can get them. "Sir, with respect, this is madness. The turbulence alone from the open bay will be significant." Tate finishes the sentence, his voice carrying the weight of orders he cannot question. The modifications begin immediately. Priority: Alpha. Everything else stops. Bennett watches Tate walk away, his footsteps echoing in the vast hangar. Around him, other maintenance crews are receiving identical orders. The confusion is palpable. These aren't damaged aircraft being stripped for parts. These are frontline bombers, veterans of dozens of raids over Germany. By noon, the work has begun. Pneumatic drills shriek as they bite into aluminum. The bomb bay doors, each one a masterpiece of engineering designed to protect the aircraft's payload and maintain crucial aerodynamic flow, are unbolted and stacked against the hangar wall like discarded shields. Flight Lieutenant Joe McCarthy, one of the surviving Dambusters pilots, walks through the chaos. His crew has been told they'll be flying one of these modified aircraft. He stops beside Bennett, watching as hydraulic lines are capped off where the door mechanisms once connected. "Tom, be straight with me. What's our speed going to be with this modification?" Bennett doesn't sugarcoat it. "You'll lose at least 20 miles per hour, sir, maybe 25. And the fuel consumption, the engines will be fighting that drag all the way to target and back." McCarthy's jaw tightens. 25 miles per hour might not sound like much to a civilian, but at 20,000 feet over Germany, it's the difference between outrunning a Focke-Wulf 190 and becoming another telegram to a widow. The modifications continue through the night. Extra steel plating is riveted to the main spar, the Lancaster's backbone. The irony isn't lost on the crews. They're removing weight-saving components, only to add heavy reinforcement. The aircraft are actually gaining weight while simultaneously becoming less aerodynamic. It defies every principle of aircraft design. Squadron leader Les Monroe examines his modified Lancaster the next morning. The open bomb bay looks obscene, like a wound that won't heal. When he climbs inside for a test run, the difference is immediately apparent. The aircraft shudders and groans in ways it never did before. The controls feel sluggish, unresponsive. The Merlin engines, usually sufficient to maintain steady flight, now strain against the additional drag. "It's like flying a barn door," his flight engineer mutters over the intercom. But the orders keep coming. These modified Lancasters are to receive priority for everything: fuel, maintenance, crew assignments. The best pilots in Bomber Command are being quietly transferred to squadrons operating these doorless aircraft. Nobody talks about it openly, but everyone knows what this means. Whatever these Lancasters are being prepared for, it's worth sacrificing an entire squadron's worth of aircraft and potentially their crews. March 3rd, 1944. Briefing room, RAF Coningsby. The smoke from 40 cigarettes creates a blue haze in the briefing room. The men of 617 Squadron, what's left of the original dambusters, sit in uncomfortable silence. They've been here before, many times, but tonight feels different. The modified Lancasters have been arriving all week, each one stripped and reinforced according to those mysterious specifications. Group Captain Leonard Cheshire stands at the front, his boyish face betraying none of the tension that's been building for weeks. Behind him, a curtain covers the target board. Usually, this is the moment of revelation. Berlin, Hamburg, the Ruhr Valley. Tonight, the curtain stays closed. Gentlemen, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. His voice cuts through the smoke. You've all noticed the modifications to our aircraft. You've felt the performance degradation. You've wondered why we're deliberately crippling our best bombers. Pilot Officer Bill Reed shifts in his seat. 3 weeks ago, he'd barely made it back from Dusseldorf with 2 engines out and half his tail shot away. Now they want him to fly something even slower, even more vulnerable. Cheshire continues. The modifications are necessary to carry a new weapon. I cannot tell you more than that. What I can tell you is that our training regime is changing immediately. The curtain is pulled back, but instead of a target map, there's a single photograph. It shows a Lancaster in flight, but something's wrong with the image. Protruding from the bomb bay is something massive, cylindrical, almost comically large. It looks like the aircraft is giving birth to a submarine. Bloody hell, someone whispers from the back. The weapon is called Tallboy, Cheshire says, though this is only partially true. The real monster, Grand Slam, is still in development. 12,000 pounds. Designed by Barnes Wallis. The room erupts. 12,000 pounds? The standard bomb load for a Lancaster is 14,000 pounds, but that's spread across dozens of smaller bombs. A single 12,000-pound bomb is insanity. Sir, Flight Sergeant Johnny Johnson raises his hand. That's why the doors had to go? Correct. The weapon is too large for conventional deployment. It must partially protrude from the aircraft. The mathematics of death start calculating in every airman's mind. Slower speed, no defensive armament on the belly, carrying what amounts to a massive "shoot here" sign hanging from their aircraft. The Luftwaffe's fighter pilots must be praying for this. Training begins at dawn. The modified Lancasters struggle into the air, their flight characteristics completely changed. Pilots who could land a Lancaster in their sleep now struggle with basic maneuvers. The open bomb bay creates vortexes that buffet the tail, making precision flying nearly impossible. But precision is exactly what's required. Barnes Wallis's earthquake bombs need to be dropped from exactly 18,000 feet at precisely 170 miles per hour. Any deviation and the bomb won't achieve the terminal velocity needed to penetrate deep enough. The margin for error is essentially zero. Day after day the crews practice. They fly out over the North Sea, wrestling their crippled aircraft into position, holding them steady despite the unnatural drag and turbulence. The bomb aimers, using a new stabilized sight, must account for the changed aerodynamics. Everything they've learned about bombing has to be recalibrated. The accidents begin in the second week. Lancaster PB 996 loses control during a practice run, the turbulence from the open bay causing a catastrophic stall. All 7 crew members die when it crashes into the Lincolnshire countryside. The investigation is quick and quiet. The widow receives a telegram about a training accident. Nothing more. Wing Commander Tate assembles the squadron after the crash. Every one of you can request a transfer. No shame, no questions asked. But know this, what we're preparing for will shorten this war. The targets we'll hit, nobody else can touch them. Not a single man requests transfer. By late March, rumors start circulating. Ground crews at other bases report seeing the modified Lancasters during stopovers. They call them death traps and flying coffins. Some enterprising mechanic nicknames them clogs, wooden shoes for dead men walking. April 18th, 1944. The Vickers Works, Walton-on-Thames. Barnes-Wallis hasn't slept properly in 3 months. The 60-year-old engineer stands in the testing bunker, watching through reinforced glass as his latest creation is hoisted into position. 22,000 pounds of hardened steel, aerodynamically perfect, with a tail designed to make it spin as it falls. Grand Slam. The name is intentionally understated for something designed to break the earth itself. The Lancasters are ready. Air Commodore Sidney Bufton informs him, having just arrived from the Air Ministry. Though the pilots aren't happy about the modifications, Wallace doesn't look away from his bomb. They'll be even less happy when they learn what they're actually carrying. The mathematics are beautiful in their simplicity. A 10-ton bomb, dropped from 22,000 feet, will reach near supersonic speed. The rotation, induced by the offset tail fins, will help it drill through earth and concrete, like a bullet through butter. It will penetrate 40 meters underground before detonating, creating an earthquake that will collapse any structure from below. The Germans have moved their production underground, Bufton says. U-boat pens with 15-foot thick concrete roofs, V-weapon sites buried in mountains. Conventional bombing is useless against them, which is why we need Grand Slam. Wallace turns to face the Air Commodore. But the aircraft modifications, they're more extensive than I hoped. It's an understatement. The Lancaster was never designed for this. The bomb is so large it protrudes 4 feet below the fuselage when loaded. The bomb bay doors aren't just removed, they can't physically exist with this weapon aboard. The aircraft's center of gravity shifts dramatically. The plane becomes tail-heavy, requiring constant adjustment from the pilot just to fly level. Test pilot Captain Eric Brown takes the first Grand Slam-equipped Lancaster up 3 days later. His report is damning. Aircraft exhibits severe instability, maximum speed reduced to 170 miles per hour. Fuel consumption increased by 35%. Defensive capability, nil. Recommend fighter escort mandatory for any operational use. But there's no alternative. The modified B-29 Superfortress could theoretically carry it, but the Americans won't share their new bomber. The Lancaster, despite its limitations, is the only aircraft the RAF has that can lift Grand Slam. The target list is already being drawn up. The Bielefeld Viaduct, carrying the main railway line from Ham to Hanover. The Arnsberg Viaduct in the Ruhr Valley. The Valentine submarine pens near Bremen, with concrete roofs 23 feet thick. Targets that have shrugged off hundreds of conventional bombing raids. Squadron leader James Bazin practices with the first operational Grand Slam on May 2nd. The takeoff alone is terrifying. The Lancaster needs every foot of runway, engines at maximum power, just to get airborne. The climb to operational altitude takes 40 minutes, twice the normal time. Every German radar station for miles will see them coming. It's like flying a pregnant whale, Bazin reports. One that's made of lead, but when they drop the practice bomb on the test range, the results are spectacular. The weapon disappears into the earth like it's made of water. 20 seconds later, the ground erupts. The seismic sensors register the equivalent of a small earthquake. Buildings a quarter-mile away crack and shift. Barnes-Wallis watches the films, sees the devastation, and feels the familiar mixture of pride and horror. He's created something that will save Allied lives by ending the war sooner. He's also created something monstrous. June 6th, 1944. D-Day, 0800 hours, RAF Woodhall Spa. While thousands of Allied soldiers stormed the beaches of Normandy, the modified Lancasters of 617 Squadron sit silent on their hard stands. The invasion has begun without them. The crews feel the sting of being sidelined during the most important day of the war. Flight Lieutenant David Shannon kicks at the grass beneath his Lancaster. Everyone else is over France right now, and we're sitting here with our flying embarrassments. But Group Captain Cheshire knows better. The modified Lancasters are being saved for targets that will matter in the weeks to come. The Germans will move their reserves by rail. They'll hide their new weapons in reinforced bunkers. That's when the earthquake bombs will prove their worth. 2 days later, the first operational mission is authorized. The target, the Saumur railway tunnel in France, where intelligence suggests the Germans have hidden a massive ammunition train. 4 modified Lancasters, each carrying a tall boy, will attempt what hundreds of conventional bombers couldn't achieve. The briefing is sobering. The tunnel is protected by concentrated flak batteries. The modified Lancasters, flying at their reduced speed, will be in the killing zone for nearly 60 seconds. Fighter escort can only do so much. If anyone wants to step down, Cheshire begins. With respect, sir, Squadron Leader Tate interrupts. Stop asking. We know the risks. June 8th, 2300 hours. The 4 Lancasters lumber into the night sky. Even in the darkness, they feel exposed. The open bomb bays create a howling that drowns out normal conversation. The crew can feel the massive bomb hanging beneath them, changing every aspect of flight. Over France, the flak starts before they even reach the target. The Germans have learned to identify the modified Lancasters by their engine sound. The Merlins straining against the extra drag create a distinctive note. Searchlights sweep the sky, hunting for them. Steady, Tate says over the intercom as his Lancaster bucks and weaves through the flak. Hold her steady. At exactly 18,000 feet, exactly 170 miles per hour, they release. The massive tall boy falls away, and suddenly the Lancaster leaps upward, freed from its burden. Through the night, they can track the bomb's fall by its whistle, a descending shriek that cuts through even the flak explosions. The impact is invisible in the darkness, but the explosion isn't. The entire hillside containing the tunnel erupts in flame. The earthquake effect collapses not just the tunnel but the entire rail line for hundreds of yards in both directions. All 4 Lancasters make it home, though Bazin's aircraft has over 200 flak holes. The mission is a success, but the cost is clear. They were lucky. The Germans are learning. March 14th, 1945, RAF Bardney. The war is almost over. Everyone knows it. The Allies are across the Rhine, the Russians are closing on Berlin, but the modified Lancasters have one more job, the biggest yet. Squadron Leader Charles Calder stands beside his Lancaster, running his hand along the smooth metal of the Grand Slam, protruding from its belly. 22,000 pounds. The first operational use of Wallace's ultimate weapon, the target. The Bielefeld Viaduct, a crucial railway link that has survived everything Bomber Command has thrown at it. You know what the lads are calling it? His flight engineer, Flying Officer Eddie Wheeler, says, joining him in the pre-dawn darkness. The 10-ton Tess. Calder manages a smile. Humor is how they cope with the absurdity of what they're about to do. Fly a deliberately crippled aircraft deep into Germany, carrying a bomb so large it defies belief. The takeoff is scheduled for 0900. Every available foot of runway has been cleared. Fire crews and ambulances are positioned at intervals. Everyone knows that if a Grand Slam-equipped Lancaster fails to get airborne, the explosion will level half the base. As the sun rises, 14 Lancasters prepare for the mission. Only Calder's carries the Grand Slam. The others carry tall boys. They'll hit the viaduct simultaneously, but everyone knows the Grand Slam is the main event. The engines roar to life. Inside Calder's Lancaster, the crew feels the aircraft protest as it begins to roll. The tail wheel lifts at 95 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour later than normal. The main wheels stay glued to the runway. 110 miles per hour. 120 miles per hour. The end of the runway is approaching fast. "Come on, you beautiful bitch," Calder mutters, pulling back on the stick. At 125 miles per hour, with less than 200 feet of runway remaining, the Lancaster finally staggers into the air. The climb is agonizing. 500 feet per minute, half the normal rate. They circle the base for 20 minutes, just to reach 10,000 feet. The formation heads east. Fighter escort joins them, Mustangs and Spitfires, but everyone knows that if the Luftwaffe shows up in force, the modified Lancasters are doomed. Over Germany, the flak starts. The Germans have positioned their batteries specifically to target the earthquake bomb carriers. They know about the precise altitude and speed requirements. The killing zone is perfectly calculated. Black puffs of smoke burst around them. Shrapnel rattles against the fuselage like hail. Through the open bomb bay, Calder can actually see the ground, a surreal experience at 22,000 feet. "Target in sight," the bomb aimer, Flight Sergeant John Saunders, announces. The Bielefeld Viaduct appears ahead, 5 massive stone arches carrying the vital railway line. It has stood for nearly a century. In 30 seconds, Barnes-Wallace's mathematics will test themselves against German engineering. Steady, steady. The Lancaster is bucking now, fighting the turbulence from its own open bay, the flak explosions, and the natural air currents. Calder's arms ache from holding it level. Bomb gone. The aircraft lurches upward, suddenly free. 10 tons of death falls toward the viaduct. Calder banks hard left, standard procedure to avoid the blast, but he can't resist looking back. The Grand Slam hits at nearly 700 miles per hour. It doesn't explode on impact, it drills into the earth beside the viaduct's central pier and disappears. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the earth moves. The explosion, 40 feet underground, creates a localized earthquake, measuring 3.9 on the Richter scale. The viaduct's foundations, solid for a century, simply cease to exist. The massive stone arches collapse like a house of cards, taking over 100 yards of approach embankment with them. "Jesus Christ," Wheeler whispers over the intercom. The other tall boys impact seconds later, but they're almost redundant. The Grand Slam has already won. March 19th, 1945. The Arnsberg Viaduct. 5 days after Bielefeld, they're back. Another modified Lancaster, another Grand Slam, another impossible target. The Arnsberg Viaduct has survived 10 previous raids. Today, Squadron Leader Calder will try to repeat his success. But the Germans have adapted. They've positioned smoke generators around all vital targets. As the Lancasters approach, the entire valley fills with artificial fog. The viaduct disappears beneath a white blanket. "I can't see a bloody thing," Saunders reports from the bomb, aiming position. They circle for 20 minutes, burning precious fuel, waiting for a gap in the smoke. The modified Lancaster, already sluggish, becomes harder to control as the fuel tanks empty unevenly. Finally, a wind gust creates a momentary clear spot. Saunders doesn't hesitate. Bomb gone. This time, Calder doesn't look back. He knows what's coming. The familiar earthquake, the thunder of collapse. Another vital link in Germany's rail network destroyed. By war's end, the modified Lancasters will have dropped 41 Grand Slams and 854 tallboys. They'll have destroyed viaducts, railway bridges, U-boat pens, and underground factories that no other weapon could touch. The cost: 8 modified Lancasters lost, 50, 6 aircrew killed. Each man knew the risks of flying a deliberately crippled aircraft into harm's way. Each man did it anyway. Epilogue: The Measure of Courage. May 8, 1945. V-Day. RAF Woodhall Spa. The war in Europe is over. Flight Sergeant Tom Bennett walks through Hangar 2, where it all began 15 months ago. A lone modified Lancaster sits in the corner, its bomb bay still gaping open like an unhealed wound. He runs his hand along the reinforced spar, feeling the extra steel that made these aircraft so heavy. The engineering was insane. The concept was insane. By all rights, these aircraft should never have worked. But they did work because of the men who flew them. Men who accepted a 20 miles per hour speed reduction in exchange for carrying democracy's biggest stick. Men who knew that modified meant more dangerous, but climbed aboard anyway. Wing Commander Tate finds Bennett in the hangar. "Going to miss them?" Tate asks, nodding toward the Lancaster. Bennett considers the question. "No, sir, but I'll miss the men who flew them, bravest bastards I ever met." The modified Lancasters would never fly again. Within months, they were all scrapped. Their specialized role ended, but their legacy lived on in every bridge that didn't get rebuilt, every submarine that never sailed, every V2 rocket that never launched because its factory was buried under tons of collapsed concrete. Barnes-Wallace's mathematics had worked. The RAF's courage had worked. The doorless Lancasters, those flying coffins that seemed to defy every principle of military aviation, had shortened the war. In the end, that's all that mattered. The Lancaster crews had a saying, "Press on regardless." The men who flew the doorless bombers, carrying their impossible loads into impossible danger, had given those words their ultimate meaning. They pressed on when the doors came off. They pressed on when the speed dropped. They pressed on when the flak found them. They pressed on regardless. And in pressing on, they proved that sometimes the most unlikely weapon isn't the bomb you carry, but the courage of those willing to deliver it.